Hey, welcome to Ike's Vintage Tech. It's a well-known scientific fact that any board made in the early 2000s can be fixed by just replacing the caps. Let's see if that actually holds up. Thanks for watching. If you like seeing electronics repaired with sarcasm, please consider subscribing. It really helps. I also have a Patreon that I'll link down below. About a year ago, I picked up this Gateway Pentium 4 PC, and it actually worked for just long enough for me to try to install Linux on it, and then it just died. Completely died, no power. All I get is an amber light up front, nothing else. No fan spin, no sign of life whatsoever. So what I'm going to go ahead and do here is replace the caps and just see if that works. If it doesn't, there is the alternative method of repair, which is called eBay, and that is my next step if this doesn't do it. I don't want to go too deep into this. I believe that the caps might be bad just because of the age of the system and the fact that there are not that many Pentium 4 boards that don't have bad caps. Bad caps aren't a end-all be-all fix-it for everything from the early 2000s, but it's a good place to start and it's fairly cheap. I'm also not going to bore you with the entire replacement of every single cap. That's been done ad nauseum on YouTube, so I'm just going to go ahead and replace the caps, and I'll do a speed run, and I'll see you in a minute. Alrighty, after quite a while, I was able to get all the caps replaced. I was only interrupted about a dozen times, which as a parent is on par, and it still didn't work. Surprise, surprise, you would think that replacing caps would just fix everything. It wasn't the cap. The issue I was having was I could plug in the 20-pin connector and the power supply self-test button would test green. As soon as I plugged in the 4-pin CPU connector, it would fail. So the actual issue is this little MOSFET right here. It's about $1.50 to replace, and next time I get a parts order in, I'm going to go ahead and order one of these, and this will be a working board again. Luckily, I was able to get a very cheap board on eBay, and this is actually what I used to test back and forth. Since I don't have schematics, I basically just kept measuring continuity until I found something that didn't match. And it didn't take me too long. I started with the MOSFETs, so it was pretty quick, and I have a working board. On top of that, I do have a CPU that I ordered as an upgrade. I believe this is a 2.2 gigahertz, and it will actually bump the speed up quite a bit, as the original was a 1.6. This was a $3 part on eBay, so I love saving money, and it wasn't a bad upgrade. So we're going to get that on there. The one downside I might have is if the BIOS isn't compatible, I might have to put the old CPU in, upgrade the BIOS, and then get that in there. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, then I've got the old one to go back to. As far as replacing this little guy, I did check all my junk boards. I don't have any boards that have this particular MOSFET or a compatible one. So like I said before, it will just be on my future orders list. Now, a lot of these Pentium 4s actually ran pretty hot, and that is part of the reason why a lot of the capacitors fail. Now, everyone says that capacitors from the early 2000s are all bad. It's not necessarily the case. Eventually, all capacitors do fail, but in this case, if they lasted this long and they didn't leak, they weren't part of the bad caps back in the day that had either the counterfeit recipe or whatever theory you want to put behind that. If they lasted 20 years, they were the good ones. The ones that failed back then failed catastrophically in most cases, where they would leak, pop, or pretty much just die within a year or two of use. And all of these were actually good. After I got them off the board, I went ahead and did a basic test on my multimeter, and they all passed. Now, I don't have an ESR meter. It might actually fail ESR, but for how little I would actually use an ESR meter, I don't need one at the moment. I'm sure they're cheap. I just don't need one. It's not on a high priority of all the things I got to spend money on for the channel right now. Alrighty, we got this all together. The RAM was already in there. It came with a gig of RAM. The old board had a gig of RAM. This board does support 2 gig if I got 2 1 gig sticks. Eventually, it's not a high priority as many other things right now. And I'm going to put it inside. On top of that, I do have an unopened, partially open, the plastic has ripped over the years, but I do have a brand new ATI Radeon 9550 I'm going to be putting in here. This should be a huge boost compared to the old video card that was in there. I'm pretty sure it was a very basic ATI GPU. I forget what it was. It wasn't anything fancy. So let's go ahead and get this in, clean up my workspace, and I'll be right back. All right, now for a quick unboxing. I don't normally do unboxing on this channel because everything I touch is old and usually unboxed. So this is a nice little change of pace. Let's go ahead and slide this out. I don't know if this is one of their red cards or green cards. They kind of changed their design right around this period in time. There we go. Try not to damage the box. It'll make a nice display in the new studio when it's all done. It is made for Windows XP, and that's exactly what we're going to be putting on here today. There we go. Found the opening. Important, do not return this product. I don't think I could. Got our little manual, CD for drivers and whatnot. Extra packing foam. Okay, I'm actually quite happy to see that I got the red version. There are green versions of this card. And this is new, never been used. I don't see any puffy caps, which is nice because that's also a possibility. Looks nice and clean. I don't see any witness marks on the AGP connector there, and it is clean. I've got one DVI. It looks like a AVIO. I wonder if that's S-Video or it'll also be whatever dongle that I don't see included here, and a regular VGA. So we're gonna go ahead and put this in. All right, I'm gonna get this buttoned up. I'm gonna get a monitor, keyboard, and mouse, and I'll be right back. Alrighty, after a whole bunch of rearranging things, I got everything in frame, and I hope you can see what I'm about to do here. So let's cross our fingers and turn it on. Push the button harder. Uh-oh. Oh. All that trouble buttoning everything up, I forgot to plug in the front panel. Okay, let's get that done. I'll be right back again. Of all the problems I could have had, I'll take forgetting to plug something in. All right, here we go again. See if it works. There we go. Now, I'm probably gonna have to go in the BIOS. Nothing is set. I don't even know if this thing will boot off a USB. I'm gonna try to find out. It does notice that I have a 2.2 gigahertz processor. All the RAM is there, so that is very good. Let's go ahead and set the time. I can disable the audio device. I already have a better sound card in there. So we will disable that, keep the LAN enabled. Okay, I wasn't sure which was the primary or secondary. It wasn't quite labeled clearly on the board. It just said primary, and it was right between the two of them. So I do have to swap that. That'll be real quick. I have a regular spinning 120 gigabyte hard drive in there. It is nice that it does see that, but I just have to swap the cables quick. That won't take long at all. USB boot is enabled. I was curious about that. This should have had it based on the age, but I will be able to install Windows XP off a thumb drive, which was very nice. I'm running low on burnable CDs. I don't need to burn them for every little thing. I'm going to exit saving changes, and then I'm just going to power it down, swap those IDE cables, and be back again. Starting it back up again, we're going to go ahead and boot off that thumb drive, get Windows XP installed, and hopefully have a working computer. Okay, it's actually trying to boot off the old hard drive. I need to go into the BIOS and tell it to boot off the thumb drive. We'll see how that works. Alrighty, I couldn't figure out the USB boot, so not a big deal. I did try to Pixie boot, but for some reason the network card just doesn't show up. That might be an issue. I'll find out later. I burnt a CD, so we're going to do it the old-fashioned way. Let's get this started, and hang tight. I'll be back with a Windows XP install. Hopefully. It appears the installer is working as it should. Going to go ahead and do the typical Windows install, and we will be back with a proper desktop. F8 to agree. Alrighty, after a little bit of debugging, I got everything figured out. For some reason, the onboard NIC does not work on this thing, network interface card. It does not work on this thing at all, so I'm going to fix the old board. If the old board does work, I'll use that board primarily, and I'll figure out what to do with this. It's not a big deal. I was able to install a regular 10100 D-Link card that I had lying around, and I do have network connectivity on this thing. I was able to do a couple Windows updates via Legacy Update and got everything running great. Now, all the drivers except for the GPU were working without any changes. I didn't have to modify anything. All the drivers just shown up. Sound card, what little few things are left in here. It was just the GPU really is all I had to do. But that's pretty nice considering a lot of older computers, you'd do a fresh install of Windows and then you'd have to install like 8 or 9 different drivers just to get your stuff up and running. This is fairly smooth. Windows XP had a pretty large driver database for its time, and everything did just work. And as you see here, while I'm rambling on, it did boot up pretty quick. Now it's telling me I need to install .NET Framework 2.0 or later for the Catalyst software to work for the ATI drivers. Now, the drivers work fine. It's just the Catalyst software. If I want to tweak the settings a little bit, that's something I'll worry about later. I will be putting in a SATA RAID card on this thing just so I can get a modern SSD installed, get rid of the spinning rust, and everything should work a lot better. And it's already booting up fairly fast in Windows XP with a 120 gig actual spinning hard drive. So for its time, this is actually a pretty decent machine, a gig of RAM, 2.2 gigahertz processor now, upgraded from the 1.6. And I'm very happy with the install. Let me guys know if you want to see me run anything on this in particular. I'll definitely want to try some different older versions of Linux, see if I can get newer versions of Linux. If you remember, this was the one I tried getting Linux on a long time ago, and that's when it died on me. So with all that said, thank you guys for watching. I am almost done with my new studio. I'm going to be moving out of this room, giving it to my son because he needs a bed to sleep in because he's almost 3. It's time to get out of the crib. So this is going to be his room. I'm going to clean up the garage. Well, the garage is mostly clean. I'm rambling again. The garage is mostly clean. I just have to put up some soundproofing tile to avoid cars driving by like that. But soundproof tile, I want to get like, you know, some sort of monitor or TV behind me to look cool. Why not? All this stuff is something I'm going to be doing in piecemeal. I'm not going to be dropping $1,000 all at once. It's over time. But that brings me to my second point. I do have a Patreon. If you guys want to support my effort here, it would be greatly appreciated. It doesn't take a lot, but I'll definitely be very thankful for anything you guys give. And that's it. I'm very happy. I got this thing working finally after all these months of it being dead. And it turned out to just be this little guy right here. This little effer. And it's working great. I'm going to go ahead and get this put in my garage. I'll be making a video shortly of the new garage setup. It's my entire wall is one entire desk. And that's all the PCs I can fit on it. PCs, Mac, whatever. It's all the ones I can fit on it on display. I've got a shelf behind me that will have all the other stuff that doesn't have a home. And I'll rotate that stuff out as needed, make videos of it. And I want you guys to tell me what you see out of my collection that you want to see next. Thank you guys very much for watching, and stay tuned for more very soon.